of what I said. Perfect.
So today, yes, it's Parshat Devarim. Good morning, Margaret. But what we're going to do is talk about what we call the 3 weeks, the 9 days, leading into Wednesday night, Thursday, which is the 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Tisha B'Av, the famous day that God promises us, is now a day of mourning. Good morning, Margaret. But we'll turn into a holiday, a day of rejoicing, and a day where we're going to celebrate and be happy and eat. Because now on Tisha B'Av, Wednesday night at sunset, Shkia, it's called, 18 minutes before sunset or a little before it, you eat a bagel. You eat a hard-boiled egg dipped in a little ash. You get a little ash going. You sit on a low chair, and when you finish eating in time, you start the 24-hour fast. It's the only other 24-hour fast except for Yom Kippur.
Wow.
Now, why do we eat a bagel and an egg? Because that's mourner's food. It's round to show us, to remind us that life is round.
Yeah.
Right, cyclical. At times you're on top of the world, at the times you're in the bottom of the world. And there are times of happiness, times of sorrow. And mourners eat a bagel when they come back from the funeral, and an egg, because an egg doesn't have an opening to show that when you're in mourning, you're subdued, you're humble, you're down, no mouth. And you change into non-leather shoes, and you go to the synagogue, or nowadays people are going to stay home, a lot of people, and you read Eicha Lamentations, it's called. Beautiful, heart-wrenching poems about the destruction of the first temple and the second temple and what happened. When you read it in English, your heart breaks. It's horrifying, horrifying. So that's Tisha B'Av. And these 9 days before Tisha B'Av are days of mourning. You don't swim, you don't wash clothing, you don't have weddings, you don't listen to music, you don't take haircuts. You follow a semi-mourning period till culminated by Tisha B'Av. And after Tisha B'Av, we go back, thank God, to normal life. We're the only nation, the only religion that 3 weeks of the summer are designated as sad weeks of mourning. It's insane. Everyone is celebrating summer. We take off for 3 weeks where there's a feeling of like sadness, subconsciously, some people consciously. And it's an ominous feeling. It's not a happy feeling because you know you're coming to Tisha B'Av. So today I want to ask the question, why are we still fasting and mourning Tisha B'Av so many years after the destruction of the first temple and the second temple? Like when I was a kid, I asked my mother, just because they suffered, I have to suffer. You know, a lot of kids, that's what's on the mind. Why are we still fasting on Tisha B'Av? And what is it about Tisha B'Av that we can gain inspiration and insight into our lives? Especially those of us who didn't grow up with Tisha B'Av. Many of us, somebody told me they didn't even know about Tisha B'Av in their life. So what is can we gain by getting ourselves involved in these days? And we also know the Torah is not big on mourning. The whole foundation of Judaism is serve God with joy. The Baal Shem Tov said, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. However, you notice that there are times when the Torah tells us to be sorrowful, to mourn, and that's Tisha B'Av. Why? When you're in a state of sorrow, when you're in a state of sadness, when you're in a state of mourning, then you can appreciate joy so much more. When you're not that we, God forbid, ever want to experience sadness or unhappiness or death or destruction. But Tisha B'Av is a day when we have experienced it and continue to experience, and I'll explain soon, So it is a day when we are sorrowful. We're commanded to be sad, so to speak. And that sadness makes us appreciate the perspective of being joyful. If you never felt sorrow or pain, it's very hard to, first of all, show empathy, but also hard to experience true joy. What is true joy if not realizing that you are no longer sad, depressed, in pain? That's true joy in a sense. So a few terrible things happened on Tisha B'Av throughout history. So it's not a one-time event. This happened so we don't realize. Universal Jewish day of mourning, because terrible things happen consistently on Tisha B'Av. I want to share with you because people don't realize. The Meraglim, remember the story of the spies? When did they come back and talk bad about Israel and say it's terrible, we're never going to be able to enter? Tisha B'Av. Happened on Tisha B'Av. A premonition of what was to come, in a sense. The first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av. The second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed the same day, many years later. The Battle of Beitar was lost. You know, with the story of Shimon Bar Kochba, if we have time, we'll go into the story. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290 CE. The Jews were banished from Spain in 1492. Columbus was a Jew. And both world wars began on Tisha B'Av. In 1914, World War I began, and World War I, we know, led to World War II. On Tisha B'Av. And there's many other things I've heard over the years, historical or personal tragedies that happened to people on Tisha B'Av. So these days are like a little bit scary. Like somebody called me, they want to go boating. I said, better not. Don't go boating. You don't do anything too crazy, adventurous during these days. It's not the lucky days in the Jewish people. Not that you should walk around and you can't smile and you can't giggle and you can't tell a joke. It's more that these are days that we contemplate the tragedies that have befallen our people and continue to befall our people. Napoleon was walking in Europe, and it was Tisha B'Av, and he passed with his aides a house of worship, a shul, and he heard wailing. They were reading Eicha, Lamentations, and it's read in a wailing tone, and people cry because it's so horrifying when you read it. So he says to his aide, go find out what's going on in there. The aide says, they're mourning. They're mourning the destruction. He says, of what? He says, of their temple. He says, when did it happen? I didn't hear anything. It happened over 1,000 years ago, he tells Napoleon. Napoleon says, a people that can still mourn 1,000 years after a destruction is a people that will be eternal. The mourning for the first and second Beit HaMikdash and all the tragedies that befell us is the secret to our eternity. Because it is the memories, as we'll soon discuss, that actually keep us alive. It is the memories that give us our direction in life. So he says a people that can mourn something that happened thousands of years ago, now 1,900 years ago, with destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, is a people that will be eternal. Your great-great-great-great-grandmother, your grandmother, your grandfather, maybe great past then. But for the Beit HaMikdash, over 1,900 years, we're still mourning. And one of the things I have to say also is that the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is not something that only happened thousands of years ago. Every day the Torah tells us that we're not rebuilding the third Beis Hamikdash as if it was destroyed. The fact that we do not yet have the third Beis Hamikdash is a sign that there's still a destruction. Use a simple example. You ever got a crack in your windshield of your car?
Mhm.
I did. A little crack in the corner. I said to my husband, let's not spend any money fixing it. The wise woman spoke, unfortunately. The crack got bigger. It doesn't stay. The crack got bigger, bigger, bigger. The whole windshield needed replacement. Now it really cost. There was a crack. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The crack keeps growing. The chasm is opening bigger and bigger. So Kol Zman, we are not rebuilding the third temple, creating a status of a universe that can bring Mashiach, that can have that reality. The crack grows larger. So that's why we're also mourning. Not only, past events, what does it have to do with me anyway? Because every moment that it's not rebuilt, it's as if it's been being destroyed. Every moment there's no cure, it keeps going on unchecked. The disease, the illness, the plague. It's unchecked. It doesn't stop just because there's a little teeny crack. Okay, that's it. We know many stories of earthquakes, right? Understand that destruction, especially
The sound is
spiritual.
uneven.
My sound?
It cuts in and out sometimes.
Okay, let's see if I could fix it. Let's see what's going on. How about now?
You're good.
Now I'm good? Maybe I'll move closer. So I want to share an insight. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Interrupt if it's happening again. Of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. You know that there were different sections of the temple. There was the outer, the inner, and the innermost section called the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holies of Holies. Remember we discussed it?
Mhm.
That only the high priest was allowed in. Only once a year. Only on Yom Kippur. And what was housed in the Holies of Holies? Who remembers? What item? It has to do with the Ten Commandments. The Ark. The
The Ark.
Golden Ark. The Golden Ark was housed in the Holies of Holies. What was in the Ark? The first 10 commandments, the broken ones. Remember the ones Moses broke? The second ones. And also housed in the Holies of Holies was Aaron's stick that grew almonds. Remember with the story,
Right.
with the rebellion and the 12 tribes put in the stick, the dry stick, and suddenly Aaron sprouted an almond tree. So that stick to remind the Jewish people, and one little barrel of manna from heaven. Remember the manna from heaven?
Mhm.
One little barrel. That was stored in the Holy. The ark was made out of gold, solid gold, inside and out. And on top of everybody know, out of gold. I spoke about it once before, if you recall. The cherubim, the cherubim.
Oh, right.
Margaret, you're on mute in case you want to unmute.
Oh,
The
yeah.
cherubim were the face of a carved out of gold, a boy's face, a girl's face
Girl's
with
face.
wings. Cherubim, like little children, symbolizing the boy is God, the male in the relationship, the groom. The girl is the Jewish people, the female, the bride in the relationship. When the Jewish people were good with God, the relationship was solid. The two statues faced each other.
Faced each other.
And
Right.
when there was an estrangement,
They
God
turned
was
around.
upset. It turned away from each other. So if the high priest peeked into the Holies of Holies
Mhm.
at any given time, they could see, oh, we're good with God. We're not good with God. Imagine if you had that with your husband. Every time you wanted to know, is she in a good mood? Is he in a good mood? Let me check my cherubim. So there's a crazy story that happens. The second destruction, the Romans come in and they begin destroying the temple, burning, pillaging, taking, stealing, and they come into the holies of holies and they see the cherubim. Not only are they facing each other, they're locked in an embrace. They're hugging each other. So they pick up the cherubim and they walk it down the streets of Jerusalem and they look and they say, think about all day. Look what they have in their holiest. A girl and a boy embracing. They are very depraved people. And this is what they're announcing. And comes the Talmud and all the commentaries ask, what was going on over here? It is the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It is a moment when God seemingly is totally estranged from his people. And yet the cherubim are locked in an embrace as if this is the most close moment of God and the Jewish people. What's going on here? What is going on? Shouldn't that moment of destruction, the cherubim being turned away from each other, right? God is burning down his temple. God is removing his presence from the people. The temple symbolized God's revealed presence among the people, right? They went to the temple, there were fires coming down, and the breastplate of the high priest lit up when they had questions. It was like a science fiction show going on up here, right? God spoke to Moses, and God speaks to Aaron, and God speaks to the prophets, and suddenly there's a terrible destruction, which God allowed, obviously. God wanted the destruction of the temple, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. The Romans were the vehicles. The Babylonians were the vehicles of destroying, but God is the one who allows it to happen and wants it to happen. So why? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, was it because God wanted to put across the point that you don't need the physical structure of the temple to have faith that he is with you?
Very good.
Anywhere and have him with you, even in the streets.
Excellent. So I'm going to build on your point, because that's exactly what Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, delves into and explains. The temple had to be destroyed because of the sins of the people. Like we mentioned last week, the colossal sin of hate for each other. They didn't get along, lack of unity. The betrayal to God, God could live with. But the betrayal of one Jew to another, God said, it's all over, I'm going to destroy the temple. And as Carrie just mentioned, the Beis HaMikdash symbolized the revealed relationship of God with the Jewish people. Everyone could come at any given time and see openly God's presence from all the miracles I just mentioned. The loaves of bread, they never became stale. The fires that came down from heaven, revealed. So the Beis HaMikdash symbolized in each scenario, Beis HaMikdash 1 and Beis HaMikdash 2, Temple 1 and Temple 2, the revealed presence of God amongst us. The destruction of the temple brought out a different relationship with God, the concealed relationship of God. Still very powerful, albeit concealed. This is the status we're in now. It's called Gullus, exile, darkness. Why? Because God's light is not revealed. People question God's presence. People question, is there a God? Maybe there's no God. Who says there's a God? During the temples of God, here the earth opens up, Korach gets swallowed up, the sea splits, the 10 plagues, the bread stays forever. Like, you'd have to really be, somebody, even though they went against God and they started to worship idolatry, which was another problem. But in the state we're in now, God is still part of us. We are locked and embraced with God, but it's concealed. The relationship is in a concealed form. So what God was basically telling the Jewish people, yes, there is a destruction. There has to be a destruction. The world cannot stay as it is. I have to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. However, our relationship is stronger. I am embracing you. There is a godly divine embrace. The relationship is eternal. That's what God was telling the Jewish people. Now there's another interesting mystery to the whole story. I want to go off on one more tangent. May I?
Yeah.
The very interesting, I want to just build on the cherubim because I always love this and I want to share it with you. That the cherubim and the holies of holies is, like we said, everything in the Torah is eternal. Now we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Yet, every day in our prayers, we read about how the offerings were brought and what measurements were brought and the incense. And we read and discuss constantly the Beis HaMikdash. It's not out of sight, out of mind. Oh, the temple was destroyed. Now we have shuls. Beis HaMikdash is out of sight and out of mind. Every one of our prayers talks about the Beis HaMikdash and the offerings and what we can learn from those offerings in our daily lives. And as a matter of fact, it's a mitzvah in these days, these 3 weeks up to Tisha B'Av, to study the laws of building the Beis HaMikdash and study the laws of the offerings. And when God told the prophet Jeremiah to tell the people about everything, how to rebuild, when to rebuild, and so on, Jeremiah says to God, he was one of the prophets, by the destruction of God, let's wait till the Jews return from exile. When they return from exile, now's a good time to sit them down and tell them how to rebuild. Why should I go tell them now? So God said, no. Talking about the rebuilding and giving them the instructions of rebuilding and the roles of the priests and so on is a form of rebuilding. That is the rebuilding. We're not going to wait till the Jews come back from exile to talk about the rebuilding, because the rebuilding is also in the mind, in the consciousness. So that's why also we talk about now how to rebuild, when to rebuild, what's going to be, how are the offerings, and so on, because this already are steps leading to the rebuilding. So these 9 days, people intensify. You go online, there's hundreds of lectures on the nuances of the temple and how they built it and what they built it and how they brought the offerings and why they brought the offerings and the meanings for us now, you know, the different Kabbalistic insights and so on. So what happened is this. So going back to the relationship with God and the Jewish people is really a lesson in our relationship with our own spouses. We know that the Kohen Gadol, before he entered into the Holies Holies, he went into the mikveh 5 times, 5 different times, changed his clothing. He poured. And when he went in, the Torah said
You're cutting out.
Repenting his thoughts in the Kodesh Kodashim, in Holies Holies, had to be only on the repentance and atonement and forgiveness of the Jewish people. If when he went into the Holies Holies, he began to think about paying his gas bills, his electric bills, his wife needs a new kitchen, his children need to be enrolled in college, he could die because his mind drifted away from what he had to be. At that intimate moment with God, he can only focus on representing the Jewish people before God. And that's the same thing in intimacy with our spouses. After a woman's menstrual cycle, the woman goes to the mikvah, and then she's intimate with her husband. Intimacy is the holiest mitzvah in the Torah between husband and wife. Because intimacy is the holiest act in the Torah, in the mitzvahs, unlike the Christians who say intimacy is a necessary evil, so you get married, then you could have intimacy. In Torah, the act of husband and wife being intimate is considered like the Kohen going into the holies of holies. Why? Because they're one. That's why a woman goes to the mikveh after a menstrual cycle in preparation for that moment of holiness, or many moments, until she gets pregnant, or you're menopausal, or until your next menstrual cycle. So it is the holiest mitzvah in the Torah, intimacy. Now we can appreciate why there's so much preparation for that. And that's why you can have a child. You can conceive, because it's so holy. The holiness allows us to give us the ability to create a new life. And that's the only time a human being can be godly, because we're creating. God creates, and we are given the ability to create. Intimacy between husband and wife. That's why marriage is called Kiddushin, sanctity. Why isn't it called Chasana, wedding? Because in Judaism, when two halves of one soul come back together, it's holy, and that's why the act of intimacy is holy, because it's expression of that love, of that togetherness. So I think this is what was going on. The Kruvim, God is saying to the Jewish people, even when there's a destruction, I love you more than ever. And that's why there's an interesting law in the Code of Jewish Law. People don't know this, that if you are going on a business trip and you're going to be away for a while, it's a mitzvah to be intimate with your spouse the night before your trip. So if your husband is traveling on business or you're traveling on business, it's a mitzvah in the Torah to be intimate with your wife that night before you go on a business trip. This is one of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's writes in one of the book of Chassidus. That God is saying, in the moment of destruction, I'm seemingly leaving you, but I'm going to express on my trip. In other words, the destruction of the temple. So the divine embrace, God hugs, the two cherubim are embracing. The sign of God being intimate with the Jewish people before God leaves, revealed leaving, not concealed. God is also always concealed. Let's digest this for a minute. It's heavy duty stuff.
It's amazing.
One more little point is that it is sometimes during the greatest destructions in our lives and challenges that we feel God's greatest love. Because when we're high and mighty and we're riding high and everything is perfect in our lives, you're not looking for God. You're not praying that hard in the morning. Or not at all, ladies, sometimes. When you're in pain and you're down and out and you're vulnerable, that's when you seek God. That's when you feel intimate with God. It's hard to feel intimate when you're high and mighty, when everything is perfect in your lives. You know, like your kid or your husband or you say, I need a hug. When do you need a hug? When you're feeling down a little, when you're feeling unloved a little bit, or you're feeling a little insecure, you need a hug. So that's when we feel God's divine embrace, when we're down and out. Not that there's no divine embrace before. Like, look, when your husband gives you a kiss in the morning, good morning, honey. Great. Okay, leave me alone. Go brush your teeth, you know? Okay, now. But you take it for granted, right? But when you want that kiss and when you really want it and need it, that's when you feel it much more. So that's what's going on here. The divine embrace is felt more profoundly at times of destruction and sadness. That's also what God is doing for the people of Israel at the moment. He's embracing us. So does anybody want to add anything, say something? It's such a quiet class.
Yeah, I know. Where is everybody? Right.
But even when everyone comes, you know, some teachers can't get a word in edgewise.
No.
I taught a class years ago, and there was a woman from Weston came to every class, and she taught the class. I couldn't get a word in edgewise ever. It was interesting. So here I'm saying nobody's talking. There was she took over.
Did she know anything?
She had some, no, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying sometimes it was a bit much. The other women would shush her. Okay, did Freida say something now?
Yeah, right.
She would, yeah. And actually, that's what you want. You want people to, they say more than the teacher teaches the students teach the teacher. So I learn a lot just by listening to you women, who happen to be lucky. We have an intelligent group, very intelligent. Does anybody want to add anything?
No, it's just amazing how all this symbolism, can be interpreted. It's amazing. Yeah.
What it is that if you study the Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, which is the secrets and esoteric of the Torah, really clarifies the written text, which is so hard sometimes to comprehend. We take things at face value unless we delve in and want to know, how does this really resonate with us now? Because really the Torah is eternal. That eternity is why we need to study between the lines, because sometimes it is very difficult to understand what's going on here. And I think,
when was it written? When were the Hasidic writings done?
So the entire Torah was given at Sinai with its secrets, right? The oral tradition, the written tradition. Mm-hmm. When the second temple was destroyed, sages knew the people are being dispersed all over the world. Exile. Well, like today, we have Jews in France, you have Jews in China, you have Jews in Hong Kong, you have Jews, right? Mm-hmm. They realized the oral tradition, which was transmitted in-house, because everyone lived together, now had to be written down. So the Talmud came along, which is the Gemara, the text of Halacha, and the discussions that ensued, and then the Mishnah, and then you had the books of the Zohar, the Kabbalah mm-hmm. written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which gave even deeper interpretations, and great sages, Rashi commentary on the Torah. Yeah. All these scholars, and then, like somebody said to me, oh, my rabbi gave a new interpretation. I know, but your rabbi's not Rashi. You know what I'm trying to say? So you have to know, but also remember, let's say now there are great scholars. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was the prophet of our generation. Whatever they taught enhances the Torah. How do you know when it's real? When it enhances your connection to God. If somebody starts writing, I remember my older brother Simon had a debate with this other rabbi. I called him an enlightened rabbi, too enlightened. So my brother listens to him, and my brother says, with all due respect, Rabbi so-and-so, none of your new ideas have any sources in the Torah. I'm sorry to tell you. They might sound great, they may sound intellectual, they might even be interesting, but there is no source in the Torah for your insights, for your new ideas. Any new idea or new concept has to have a source in the Torah. So anything we study is rooted in the Torah, rooted in the commentaries, comes from the opinion of the management, the Torah. I'll tell you, oh, this is what I think, but I'm no way going to tell you, oh yeah, this is it. This is what what I think is the Torah. I'll say opinion, and sometimes your opinion might be found and have a source in Torah. We're not saying new ideas cannot be found in the Torah, but they have to be found in the Torah for us to adapt it. You can't start saying, okay, now we need a new mitzvah. We're going to do it this way. Why? How? Whenever we discover new insights in Torah that we adapt, it's because it's rooted and sourced somewhere in the Torah texts. So that's how this all came about. That's why I love to show you sources so you know, where did you get that idea from? Sounds great, but come on. That's a little far-fetched now. So whatever I share with you is not my own material. I mean, I put it in my own words and I put things together, but I will tell you if it's my newfangled idea. Yeah. My intention is that we should all grow in our relationship to God and Torah, not be more distant. Yeah. So anybody want to add anything?
No, that's pretty lofty of that rabbi to try and I don't want to say put one over, but like try and say something without someone calling him on it. And it was a good thing your brother is so knowledgeable about the details that he couldn't do that.
You know, I noticed something about both my three brothers, but my two brothers who are famous, that when they give a lecture and they give out source sheets, I always see on the bottom like 10, 15 sources. And I see that with my older brother too. My older brother will give a lecture and he'll have a books in front of him or source, and he'll say, and this book, I read this. But their gift is taking these things which you and I might read and not even make headway with it. They know how to make it sound interesting, exciting, enlightening. That's their gift. They take Torah knowledge and they really like, wow, I never looked at it that way. Like things I'm sharing with you. So that's their gift. So they'll always give you their sources. Or someone will say, oh, Yosef Yitzchak, Rabbi JJ, Rabbi YY, they call him. Where did you find that? And they'll say, hold on, I'll tell you right now. So someone who's not scared to share their source and will, you know right away, oh, this guy's not making it up. Look, he's quoting the Chafetz Chaim. He's quoting this Ar Sameach. There's hundreds of ancient commentators that were brilliant in their approach of things. Just one more interesting point, because I remember somebody asking me, even though the Talmud discusses the debates, I think you should pray 3 times a day, no 4 times a day. The code of Jewish law, called the Shulchan Aruch, has the conclusion. So we're not debating when to light Shabbos candles. We're not debating how to put on tefillin. We're not debating how to slaughter an animal so it's kosher or salt an animal. Conclusions. But everyone has one conclusion. Everyone knows there's one conclusion. Shabbos starts 18 minutes before sunset. Kosher doesn't mix milk and meat. So the actual practice and application of the laws of the Torah we have in the Code of Jewish Law. There's no debate about that. Now, interesting, like my husband gave a talk on Jewish medical ethics and new ethics. Now, there's new fertility treatments. There's new ways of saving life and keeping life. The Torah has the answers. So it is our scholars who have studied Torah 30 hours a day, whatever, all day and night for years and years, who are able to take the Torah laws and derive the results from modern technology. So you're wondering, how do they know about what's permitted in fertility treatments, right? Yeah. You can't just take, let's say a husband cannot conceive. You can't just find a strange man and take his seed and then the wife gets pregnant and it's all happy and good. There are laws. What's permitted, what's not permitted, how it's done, can it be done, that cannot be done. But I'm saying, how do they derive all these new laws? From the Torah. They are geniuses and they derive from one law to another to figure out how to do it. And what's permissible by Jewish law and what's not permissible by Jewish law. So there's a whole analysis and way of doing it. And many get together to discuss it. It's not like one rabbi. Geniuses get together in Torah and they hash it out. And they have that gift and they have that godly, how do you call when you give someone like a king, anointed or appointed to do it, you know? For example, I cannot come forth and say how it should be done. I don't have smicha. 40 years and 40, you know what I mean? You have to be an official rabbi. And a paisek, it's called. A paisek means someone interprets the law of the Torah to be able to do these things. So it's also who you go to for a rabbi. My rabbi told me, who's the rabbi who told you that? It's totally not right. Or yeah, that rabbi told you? Absolutely. Rabbis are given a power, also by the Torah. Anyway, so I want to share, we have only 50 minutes. I want to share another beautiful insight from the destruction. So it was by the second temple. The great leader at the time was Rabbi Yochanan. One of the greatest leaders at the time was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the Romans had, this is by the second destruction, the Romans had already laid siege to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem had stored up. Don't forget, the Jews are no dummies. They saw it coming. They stored up enough food in Jerusalem for years. They could have survived the siege for 3-4 years. However, there are zealots, and they say to the rabbis, we want to fight the Romans. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the other great leaders say, absolutely not. You cannot win over the Romans. You know what's going on out there? They have nuclear warfare. You're not going to be able to win it. They take matters in their own hands, and they go to the warehouses of the food in Jerusalem, because remember, Jerusalem was walled in. You couldn't just break through the walls of Jerusalem. When God had the Jewish people build Jerusalem, they put walls. No one could break through those walls. Well, Jerusalem is a walled-in city. That's why they had to lay siege. Went and they burned down all the warehouses of food. So now the Jewish people, there's limited food, and the zealots make another rule: no one is allowed in or out of Jerusalem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sees the dire situation of his people. He knows what's going to happen. He says to his students, send out a notice that I'm very ill, and then send out a notice that I am now dead. And they put him in a coffin, and they sneak him out of Jerusalem. As they're about to sneak him out, one of the zealots says, who's in this coffin? They said, our great leader, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. We don't believe you that he's dead. And he takes his sword and he's about to pierce the coffin. So one of the students is very smart and says, what are people going to say about you? That you pierced the coffin of one of the greatest sages of Israel? How will that look? So he steps back, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai comes out, and he gets out, and he runs to find Vespasian, who was the like second in command of the Emperor Caesar, who sent the Romans to capture Israel, capture Jerusalem, capture the land of Israel. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai comes and stands before Vespasian, who's like the general, the 4-star general of the Roman legion. And he says to him, Your Majesty, may I talk to you? He says, arrest this man, Your Majesty? That's blasphemy. I'm no king. Caesar is my king. All I need is someone to overhear you calling me Your Majesty, and I'll be put in shackles. The king hears it. I think I'm the king. You know what's going to happen, right? As he's about to push Reb Shimon Bar Yochai aside, there's a group of soldiers are coming on their horses. Oh, Caesar has perished. You are the new and anointed, the new king of Rome. So when Vespasian looks down at Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he realizes this guy is no ordinary Jew. This guy is something special. He just prophesied that I'm the king, and he was right. So he says to him, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi, not Shimon Bar Yochai, what did I say his name? Yochanan ben Zakkai, sorry. Yochanan ben Zakkai. Yochanan ben Zakkai. Jonathan ben Zakkai. Yochanan. Not Shimon Bar Yochai. He's the guy, and he wrote the Zohar. So he says, Rabbi Yochanan, tell me what you want. I will give you whatever you want. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is thinking, what can he ask Vespasian that he'll actually give him? And this was one of the most heart-wrenching moments he writes in his life. Because what would you think he would ask?
For safety for his people.
Save Jerusalem, stop the siege.
Right.
He says, Tein li Yavna v'chachameha. Give me Yavna and its sages. Yavna was a city near Jerusalem, and sages were the wise men of Yavna, they were called. And Vespasian says to him, okay. Says to himself,
I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Rabbi
you
Yochanan ben
coming in.
Zakkai says, I hope I made the right decision. by asking for this, or else I will not have a share in the world to come. And Vespasian allows the sages to settle in Yavne, and there they continue teaching and transmitting and writing down the Torah. Now everyone debates, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ask, free Jerusalem, let my people go? Because he knew Vespasian would never agree to such a lofty request. And also,
So what happened to all the people there? Did they go to the other town?
No, they slaughtered. I'm going to read you what happens. If you read what happens to the Jews by the first destruction and the second destruction, I'll read it to you. They were killed, murdered, slaughtered. The Torah describes, I don't want to be gross, but the blood of the Jewish people ran down the streets like a river. There was so much slaughter. They were the Romans and the Babylonians who slaughtered the Jews by the first destruction, and the Romans who slaughtered the Jews, they didn't just take them, some of them in chains. They raped, they pillaged, they killed infants, babies, mothers, fathers, sons. It was a horrible destruction.
Now, why did they do, I mean, what was their purpose in doing this? They were threatened by the Jews, or they?
Why did Hitler, Yamachshir, might decide that there should not be a Jew left on the face of the earth? The same reason, the hatred for the Jew, the hate. Someone who believes in one God, the hatred for a person, the hatred for Jews. Listen, the hatred for a Jew.
Yeah.
The same reason Hitler decided to slaughter the Jews. Now, so I want to finish up with this point, that what Yochanan ben Zakkai did saved our Jewish people for all eternity. Because what, like I brought in the first question, is that it says, those who mourn Jerusalem see joy and rebuilding. So the question is, why does it say in the presence, those who mourn Jerusalem will see joy, will see rebuilding, when God brings Mashiach, when we have the third Beit HaMikdash, then we'll see it. But why now? Because now, those of us who mourn the destruction of the temple can see the joy. Why? Because what is keeping us as a people, what is keeping us going, is what Napoleon said, that we study the Torah, we relive what happened, we read Eicha. Yavne saved the Jewish people because what keeps us as a people? Not the walls of Jerusalem, not even the Beis HaMikdash. The Torah keeps us as a people. That is what eternalized us forever. And that's what Yochanan ben Zakkai, even though he didn't know whether it was the right decision, God let him make the right decision. Because without that decision, we might have kept the walls of Jerusalem for a couple of years, but the Torah would have been wiped out, because who would continue it?
So he needed a safe place to maintain it going.
Exactly. And now I want to share a story that solidifies this. So what keeps us alive and what keeps us going is memory, Torah. Sustaining what we have, not forgetting. When something is alive, you can't forget it. Let me tell you a quick insight. Joseph, remember the story of Joseph? His brothers are jealous. So they sell him to the Arab traders, and he ends up in Egypt. Remember the story?
Right.
He's sold as a slave. His brothers take his multicolored coat that was a gift from his father, and they dip it in the blood of a slaughtered sheep, and they come back to Jacob, and he says, where's my son Joseph? Oh, he got killed by the animals. Look, his jacket, his coat is covered in blood. So the Torah tells us Yaakov was not consolable. So the commentaries ask a question. After a while, people become consolable. Not that they forget the one who passed away, but God gave a power that the Kabbalah says, the power of forgetting. After labor pains, you forget the pain. Otherwise, you'll never go back in there, trust me. We are given the power of forgetting is another creation God made. Because if we couldn't forget, we wouldn't be able to live. So when someone never passes away, it's not that their memory is forgotten, but the pain suddenly recedes. And over the years, you remember the happy moments and you start forgetting the sad moments and the pain of the loss. So the Torah says Jacob was inconsolable. So the commentaries say, why? Doesn't God give us the power of forgetting? Because Joseph was really alive.
Mhm.
Because he was really alive, subconsciously Jacob couldn't be consoled because somewhere his son was still alive. Like the story with Gilad Shalit. Remember the soldier who was on a tank and they captured him and they kept him in captivity for years. You couldn't say to the parents, forget about him. We're never going to get him. They're going to kill him eventually. The pain didn't go away because he was alive. Pain from living doesn't go. Memories of the living cannot be forgotten. The Torah was alive in Yavna and continued to be transmitted from generation to generation. That's why we're still here. And that's why the memories are so important. Because memory equals life, and life equals memories. When there's death, eventually you forget. You have to forget, otherwise you can't live. A person cannot live. People who cannot forget are in terrible pain their whole lives. It's a terrible thing. Not that you should ever wallow all day in sorrow. You know. So I want to conclude with a story that really explains this. It happened recently. It's an unbelievable story I just read. Oh, no, actually, I heard it from my brother. So a Migdal Emek in Israel. Have you ever heard of Migdal Emek? It's a town in Israel, and Rabbi Yitzchak David Grossman is the chief rabbi there, and he's a legend in Israel for going out and bringing back thousands of Israeli boys and girls back to Judaism, from promiscuity, from addictions, from many problems. He's known as he saved thousands of Jewish boys and girls, and many of them became religious Jews. And he centers Migdal Emek. And there is a politician, a political guy who lives there. His name is Moti Daflin, I forgot his name. And he visited Germany. And a German guy comes over to him and says to him, hands him a wallet, a beautiful wallet made out of parchment. And says, my father gave me this wallet and told me before he died to give it to the first Jew I meet and tell the first Jew I meet to give it to the holiest man in the land of Israel. So you're the first Jew I'm meeting, and I want you to give it to the holiest man when you go back to Israel. So he goes back to Israel, and who does he give the wallet to? Rabbi Grossman. In his mind, Rabbi Grossman is the holiest Jew in the land of Israel. Look at him. He's a legend. And he tells Rabbi Grossman the following story that the German young man told him. His father tells him on his deathbed, I was a Nazi high command officer. I was responsible for the millions of Jews that were killed. I was a savage. And he shows him the wallet, and in the wallet is his card that shows that he is a high-ranking officer in the Nazi party. And he tells him the story of the wallet. And the reason I'm telling you the story of the wallet, he tells his son, is because no one should forget the Holocaust. There are people that want to deny it. No one can deny it. It happened. I was part of it. What did we do? We used to go to synagogues, and we would pillage and kill from every synagogue. One synagogue, and there was a magnificent Torah scroll. And we unrolled it across the entire floor. It was huge, he said. And it was, when I touched it, it was the most beautiful parchment. Beautiful. And I took scissors, and I cut out a chunk of the parchment, and I had it made into this beautiful wallet.
Oh, my.
And I want you to give this wallet to the first Jew and tell that Jew to give it to the holiest man in the land of Israel as a memory of what we did. So Grossman is shaking like a leaf. And he opens up the wallet. And the part of the parchment of the words, he didn't cut out a white piece of the parchment to make his wallet. He cut out words of the Torah scroll, that are done by calligraphy, special, right? With that special ink. And it is the words that say the following. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem Hashem lefnei Elokeichem. The Jewish people, you are standing today before your God. This is what it says in the parchment. You are standing, just as it says in Parshas Nitzavim, that God says to the Jewish people, Moshe says to the Jewish people in the name of God, you are standing before God today. And Rashi, Grossman says to Moti, come here, let me show you what Rashi says on this pasuk. That right before this, the Jewish people are told by God, all the punishments and destruction that will happen to them if they don't follow the ways of. So when the Jewish people heard all the destruction that's going to happen to them if they don't listen, they set them light, they turned green, Rashi says. They were horrified. They said, we will never be able to survive. How could we survive? We're not perfect. We're never going to be able to go on. Look what's going to happen to us. There's destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So Moshe says to them, Rashi says, no, you will go on because for all eternity, you will be the people of God. You are beloved and you will be the people of God for all eternity. You will never, never be destroyed. This is the parchment that he got, that testimony that the Jewish people are eternal. Why? Because the Torah is eternal. The Torah is eternal. We are eternal. Chachmei, Taimli Chachmei Yavne, he says. A city you could have, but if you do not have the Torah, that is the secret to our eternity, to our immortalization.
That's very powerful. Yeah.
And we'll end with that. So I want to say Mashiach should come. This coming Shabbos is a very special Shabbos. God, we read the Torah, and it says Chazon Yeshayahu, the prophecy of Isaiah, that there will be destruction in this week's Torah. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdisher, a lover of Jews, says Chazon means the vision of destruction, but there's another vision. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdisher says that if you merit and look up, you will see the third temple in all complete, ready to come down. It's been built. The Kabbalah explains the first temple was built by the Jews, handmade, 10,000 laborers. The second temple was built by the Jews. The third temple is already built by the divine hand, and it's waiting to come down. It's going to come down in one piece, like a UFO, like Star Trek. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdisher says there's a vision of destruction, the Shabbos, but there's also a vision of rebuilding, the third eternal. Why will it be eternal? Because this one was built by God, and when God builds something, you can't destroy it. Let's hope this Shabbos we will see what Rabbi Yitzchak Berdisher saw, the vision of eternity, the vision of the third holy temple with the coming of Mashiach. Thank you, beautiful, for having you here today. Thank you very much. Any
Amen.
questions?
Thank you, Freida.
Any questions?
Thank you, Freida.
You're welcome.